Hello, everyone. My name is Saurish Srivastava, and I'm your host on the Dialexicon podcast, where we critically engage in philosophy and correlate philosophy research to contemporary issues. Today, we have with us
Eva Virc.
who is a Ph.D. student at the University of Ljubljana at the heart of Slovenia, as well as a creative writer and a comedian. She is currently studying psychotherapy and actively studies philosophy. Hi, Eva. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
That's
How
fantastic.
are you?
I'm doing
Good
great.
morning.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Okay, with the introductions done, let's move on to our discussion today, where we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive and look at some of your research and studies and what you personally think about philosophy. So, first, for our audience that may not know you, could you please provide a little information on who you are, your background, and your relationship to philosophy?
Oh, well, yeah, sure. Yes, my name is Eva Virc and I'm from Slovenia. As you already said, I'm a PhD student in philosophy at the moment and also a student of psychotherapy. And I've been doing stand-up comedies for, I think it's been 7 years now. I actually come from a family of a lot of people in my family does movies. My brother's director, and they have this company, um, visual arts thingy. And so I think this philosophical point of view has been with me from the start, because I think artists have this philosophical point of view. My father's a photographer, and I think I saw it earlier in my life, um, that there are different possible points of view. I first saw it that through his photography, and then later on through philosophy, through comedy, and of course through psychotherapy. Mm, yes.
So, just based off of that short introduction, so I guess like taking the example of photography. In photography, there's many different interpretations of how a certain photo can look like. How has your studying in philosophy shown you how different viewpoints can also both be true? For example, in philosophy, there's always this discussion about the subjective truth. So, how does that sort of, understanding that, how does that help you in your studies or how your everyday activities? How does understanding that there could be different viewpoints shape your work?
Yes, I must say, like, one of the biggest things that I'm grateful for, is just hearing for all these years of studying philosophy how there is no objective truth, and just learning all those years, just learning that, yes, basically said there are so many point of views to reality, and how we can perceive reality, and how just that there is never, it's like everything is such it's only some constant motion of becoming and going. And so yeah, I think that after all these years of just reading so many different, so interesting philosophers and points of view, one of the things that you get, yeah, is that you can never have one certain answer for yourself. Sometimes this can be a bit, frustrating, because there are situations where you want to have like a straightforward opinion, and you want to, be a representative of some party or something like that. But you just, there's a little voice in your head that doesn't let you do that, because you know that, yeah, you can say that, but there are also some different points of view, and just, just knowing that there is no like uh, objective reality. It always comes back to that. I think that everything I do in my life, every conversation I have, every thought that I have, it always comes back to the to this. Yes. I mean, in regards to that, I'm such a big fan of what the Heidegger did for the philosophy, where he just took something that we all had for granted, and then, just twisted everything around. I mean, it wasn't just him, but I'm just giving him as an example of how he showed that even what you really, really think is the truth, and, it's so self-evident, it's not, and I think that was like so badass of him to do that, to really show how deep you can go in just realizing that nothing is really, fully stable. So yeah. And I think I think that what this gave me is it gave me an understanding of how so if you can't have an objective truth, what you can have is just constantly questioning and constantly making like self-reflecting. And I think that is very important, because that the reality is that everything is constantly changing. And I think this self-reflection is like one of the biggest things that I like achieved, or that I got to know through the philosophy, and really understand how important it is to do that.
Yeah, I mean, one of my friends was saying that, philosophy is not the field you'd go into to want to find answers to questions, but rather find new questions themselves because of, how many different interpretations you can have towards a specific topic. And you were mentioning like Heidegger, and, there's also like a bunch of other philosophers who've done the same thing. But I think like taking, like all of their approaches and sort of analyzing each different one and kind of coming to terms with maybe one or two that you might personally be able to relate to the most is just in such an interesting facet of philosophy in its first place, right? And so that's why I kind of like philosophy a lot more than other subjects, because unlike math, where there's always going to be one or a few different answers, philosophy doesn't have conclusions, and it doesn't pride itself in wanting to have conclusions, right? Like we don't base a philosopher's work based off of how accurate it is. We base it off of like the premises that they took to come to their conclusion and how they've represented that conclusion, right? Yeah, fantastic. So I guess I want to move on, and you kind of already answered this a little bit, but I wanted to know what exactly philosophy means to you. I mean, you've talked about your history with philosophy, but what is, like how does learning philosophy every day, or I guess learning philosophy in general, shape your everyday life? Does it provide new perspectives for you, and, does it influence specific decisions? Maybe like if you could provide like a specific example where some research you might have done into philosophy has shaped like some other decisions you've made, or how could you characterize philosophy's impact on you as an individual?
Okay, so for beginning, I can maybe use this basic everyday example that's been going on for the last 2 years. And I think that the in Slovenia we had a lot of throughout the pandemic, there was so many conspiracy theories, and a lot of people like were searching for answers in them. And once you're bombarded with so many different explanations of what is going on, it can be difficult to just shape your own opinion, because it is, yeah, you can't know, you don't know, right? And I think that's one of these examples where where the philosophy gave me this power to understand that it's okay to not have the answer right now, because sometimes it was either having a simple and shallow answer, probably conspiracy theory, and on the other hand, not yet having an answer, and it's okay too. Just I think it gave me the understanding and the power to not always knowing everything, because it's hard for people. We always want explanation. We always want to have the structure. We want to know, like the brain wants to have the explanation right away of what is going on, and you can't have it all the time sometimes. And yeah, having this understanding that it's okay not to have not to understand everything yet, and just wait for new informations, and just wait for things to happen, and so you can see more of it. I think that was quite an important thing for me in this specific situation, right? Um, yes, for example. And I don't know, some others, my master thesis was on narcissism, for example. And that is also, when I finished, I was actually so grateful that I picked this topic, because I understand a lot of what's going on around me so much more, so, better now. And yeah, it's combining philosophical works with specific situations. It's a very interesting thing, because I mean, when I started studying philosophy, I didn't really know that this is how you do things. I just thought, oh, the Greeks are talking about the soul, the time, or whatever. What does that have to do with anything in my everyday life? But then once you get to know the philosophy and get to know different, on one hand, you get to know a lot of different authors, and on the other hand, you start seeing what you read in your everyday life, in the structure of what's going on. And so through time, I think that it becomes more and more applicable on just everything that goes on around you. So like, for example, I gave two examples, but I think we could have found a lot of them more.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, philosophy is definitely an abstract field, which is quite ironic because philosophy likes to characterize other things as abstract. But it makes so much more sense when you actually start delving into it. And I think the main point when you start to understand philosophy's impact is when you start reflecting on philosophy. Like that reflection part and sort of introspection itself is such a crucial part of philosophy because it really allows you as an individual, as your mind, your consciousness to kind of view different theories, view different analyses, and come to a conclusion by yourself. Maybe that conclusion might not be correct. It might not be the only conclusion, but it's your own conclusion. And that's what I think philosophy is powerful. I want to backtrack a little bit onto your master thesis about narcissism. Could you explain a little bit more about like what research you did and like how exactly you came about the idea of wanting to talk about narcissism, and what were some of like the difficulties you might have had writing that thesis, because like it's such a maybe like an abstract or it's such a I don't know, it seems like a very difficult concept to grasp, and there might be many different interpretations. I think vaguely my only memory of like the origins of narcissism is I think it was like a Greek myth of like someone staring into a lake or something. Um,
Yeah,
I'm not exactly
that's
sure,
him.
but yeah, yeah. Could you explain a little bit more?
Of course, yeah. What I mentioned, my thesis is because I actually picked the topic. So I didn't know what I was gonna do my master's thesis on, and so I was just actually I that time I had like I thought I had a lot of narcissistic people surrounding me, but then again I found it like maybe impossible to admit that all of these people are narcissists. Like, can you really say that? So he looks like a narcissist, she looks like a narcissist, and I was doubting that is what is going on. I mean, I found it funny that so many people are narcissists, and I was like, okay, but what does it mean? I mean, how is that possible? Where is it coming from? Like, where are all these people coming from? What's going on? And so I decided to let's research that. And because yeah, the this epidemic of narcissism was actually what I found very fascinating, and because it also impacted me in my personal life, of course, because these are very strong people who leave like a huge impact on you. Um, and so yeah, what I found very interesting was I went through Freud, Lacan, and all these psychoanalytical theories on narcissism. Very interesting how how narcissists are being being raised, what kind of attitude makes a narcissist, and then how they it's very interesting how they don't have the ability to see the other person as a subject, but they can only see them as an object, and like as a mirror for like seeing themselves in other people. But then other thing that was very interesting was my mentor suggested that my motive should be a selfie. And when he said it, I said, how is it? Is that really a philosophical thing? Isn't that like too mainstream? And he said that it's not about what you write about that is philosophical. It's like how you write it that makes it philosophical. And it was also a very interesting advice that I never really thought of it before. And so yeah, when we came to the selfies, like everyone is making selfies and there's so many of that, but an interesting thing is that like social media, if you look in the background, a lot of there's a lot of um, um, sorry um, there's a lot of control, over our informations and so on. And an interesting thought was that, so you have all these people making selfies, just showing your face, like straightforward picture of your face, putting it on social media, and just giving these informations like your face, face recognition, informations about your face and the way you look and your facial expression, facial expressions, and just everything, and you put it on social media, and we kind of know the surveillance that is behind that, how where the informations are going. And it was interesting to think of it as this is kind of the first time that we are kind of deliberately going under huge surveillance. Nobody's forcing us to do that. We all go on social media on our own, because narcissism is kind of a symptom of a permissive society. And just for example, the company being a family, this is what comes out of, this is one of the symptoms of permissive society, that you go to work and you have to act like we are all family, like we're not family, we are here to work. And it's kind of an emotional manipulation through things like that, like saying that we're family and so on. And so what interested me was, like, on one hand, the society looking so free, um like cool to be in it, but on the other hand, in the background, the surveillance is much bigger than it was before, when the surveillance was much more straightforward. So yeah, that was like the end of conclusion.
Mm. I
So
think
yeah,
that's I think it's
like,
really interesting how you can take like something that affects an individual and then apply it to the entirety of society, right? Like narcissism is something that affects like one person. It might affect more than one person, but it is characterized to an individual. But you kind of looked at that in sort of like a societal lens, which I do have another like follow up question. But real quickly, I want to say that your story and kind of like what you were analyzing kind of reminds me of. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the show Black Mirror on Netflix, but it's about like a very hyper digitalized society where everyone is almost treated as like a family kind of, but they're forced into like a place of like hyper digitalization. And many philosophers have talked about the work of Black Mirror because it is a dystopia that the authors, I think, believe could potentially come in our own reality. And so there's a lot of discussion. I've read a lot on how Black Mirror is more than just a dystopia, but rather a current analysis of the world, right? And so I think that like that process of digitalization, especially through means of social media, is definitely there, and it's like a growing kind of, I want to say, a necessity for students. And you know, like people my age, you know, I'm 17, and so people around me like kind of assume that, you know, if you don't have it, you are almost a social outcast, right? If you don't have social media, it's like people question why that's the case. It's not like, oh, I take my own, like, I kind of want my own autonomy in deciding what apps I utilize. But no, you're kind of characterized as, oh, you wouldn't be popular on social media. Maybe that's why you don't have it. Oh, or you're not popular right now, so you can't really connect with individuals. That's why you don't have social media. And so there's this kind of characterization that social media is necessary for individuals, which maybe could be, you know, a broad claim about how um, narcissistic society has become, almost, where it kind of assumes that you need to have an app in order to be a well you know, functioning individual in society. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit more and talk about um, sort of, I'm not sure if this is an actual field. I was just thinking maybe like political narcissism. Like, can states be narcissistic? For example, like the United States, often heralded as, you know, one of, well, it claims itself to be one of the greatest nations on earth. But what's very interesting about our nation is almost every single classroom you go into, you will always see a flag. In parades, you will always see a flag. Is it possible for countries to be narcissistic? And are acts of military aggression signs of narcissism? So, like maybe the example of Russia and Ukraine right now, can that be an example of like states being narcissistic? Is that possible?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I think that the whole the society itself is like we have. So when you said it affects one person, an individual, the narcissism, um, yeah, but it just shows that because there's so many narcissistic individuals, that this is kind of a symptom of this pathological symptom of the whole society. I mean, I think the society is producing the narcissistic people, but then again, the society is always producing some kind of pathology based on the whole construct of society. I don't know. I mean, yeah, it is interesting question to ask if the country can be narcissistic. I mean, we can. I think we can like um, give the same example given the individual. Like if an individual has to show his, you know, his beliefs and like all the time, um, what does that say about his beliefs? Are they really like um, does he really honestly believe in them? Did he really develop the authentic, I don't know, beliefs, and so on? You know, I think that is that will be an interesting thing to think about when talking about this need to really show who you are and what you believe in, right?
Yeah, definitely. Um, I guess we can sort of move on from your master thesis, and go into like your work in comedy. I know you say that you come from a family that's kind of in these art, or in like these art forms. So like, how has exploring philosophy through comedy worked for you, or how do you use it as a vector to increase philosophy education? And like, what do you like most about your work in comedy? I haven't really seen anyone talk about, you know, the intersection between philosophy and comedy, or just comedy in general. Like, how is that important in your life? And maybe there might not be a connection to philosophy, but that's totally okay. Just want to know a little bit more about it.
Okay, so I think that like for me, the best comedy is just philosophy with punchlines, right? So, for example, if you look at the greatest comedians, they all have the if you delete the punchlines on the left, or what you usually get some like philosophical points, right? And I think so. Yeah. Studying bringing philosophy into comedy is actually what I think is comedy, that comedy is all about. Because what comedy really is actually just like why do we laugh? Why do we like make fun of things? Is because we want to show them that is not the only way to look at them. And so I think comedy is actually the denial of the way that things are, right? Um, because what we laugh at is usually because we want to point out that why are you taking it so seriously? And now that I'm gonna make you laugh about it, I want to change your point of view. Because comedy, what it does is just takes a thing that is so self-evident and shows it from a different point of view to show you that to help you make like these things stand out of this self-evident right stance, and yeah, show it from different perspective to to get you to look at it differently, and maybe I don't know, stop believing in it, or stop taking it so seriously. So I think it is the same what philosophy does, right? I mean, that's exactly what Heidegger did. I mean, and others. Well, he just pointed at something that was really self-evident, and he said we can still look at it from different point of view, and that is really badass. And that is what comedy I think should do, and what comedy is all about, right? Just to show it from a different point of view. And that is why I think it's so ironic when comedians like do comedy and they write their material with the thought that they want to be liked, they want to write something that the audience will like. I mean, you're not there to be liked, you're there to show them, and if they don't like it, well, what you gonna do? I mean, that's your job, right? So that is like very ironical to me, to be a comedian that wants to be liked, that wants to, because you're not there to tell people what they already know. You're there to show them what they haven't thought of yet, right? So yeah, it's kind of just, comedy is the opposite of just accepting the way that things are, and so is philosophy, and that is where I see the connection, and the very important connection.
That's really
Yes.
interesting. I've actually never even like interpreted comedy and philosophy to be like even like closely related. But now that I'm like looking at, shows that I've watched in the past, like I can definitely see how philosophy is very, very much correlated with comedy. And I think that your idea of like different perspectives is just really true. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar because this is an American comedian, but a very popular comedian here is Dave Chappelle, and Dave Chappelle is very, very known for controversial takes. Like he's actually been canceled numerous times by different communities, but he highlights, I think important facts inside of his comedy through comedy. Like he highlights like racism through comedy and correlates that to different type of oppression, and he comes to a conclusion in those I guess those shows, and he kind of just says that, like, at least the one I'm talking about, which is his most recent, he comes to the conclusion that it's not an oppression Olympics, right? Everyone can, there can be different groups who are oppressed, and so there's no reason to fight among groups, but recognizing that that oppression does happen is an important feature of coming to racial justice or just justice in general, right? And so I guess I'm curious, maybe from your personal experiences, like when you are writing jokes or something like that. Obviously, you shouldn't be writing for the purpose of being liked. That's kind of just your job. But how do you take that? Do you see a like a political injustice, and you're like, okay, I want to talk about this, and I want to come to a conclusion about this, or are you talking about simple things and then just trying to flip the way that people might view those simple things? Like, how do you come to a topic, and what is your general like message that you try to get across in your shows?
um I think in writing comedy is very important to be really true to yourself, like be like, to get your writing to be as authentic as possible, like just to really put your thought into it. That's why I have a problem with watching a lot of stand-up comedy, because you adapt to their kind of arguments and their kind of thinking so fast that you can really you can you can lose your authentic comedy voice so fast because, you know, there's someone else talking instead of you. Um, yeah, but so it's with that, it's that you have to write about the things that bother you, you know, the things that you see as a problem. Um, Sometimes you would like to have a set of like a beat on specific topic, but if there's nothing in you, then just, you know, then you don't do it, just don't do it. I mean, it happened to me just a while ago that I think that it's a very interesting the phase of writing jokes. It's a very interesting from the like psychotherapeutical or like psychoanalytical point of view, because it actually is you see what is inside you only after you finished writing. So I've learned a lot about what I have problem with after I read my my set of jokes, like retrospectively. So yeah, I think that I would just like to emphasize how important it is that it's like what you think and what you find wrong, what you want to change or show people. Yeah, it that.
I mean, yeah, that definitely makes sense. I think kind of staying true to yourself is a really good message, not just for anyone who's listening, but for comedy purposes, but also just in general in your life, right? If you're kind of trying to like follow someone else's footsteps, that's all you are. You're a follower, not the creator of those footsteps, right? And so I think that's a really good, important message to anyone really who's listening, because you should always try to create your own footprint, right? So you were kind of mentioning your work in psychotherapy, and I guess I'm really curious because I know a lot of my fellow high school friends are really interested in the concept of therapy, and this might be a very sad thing because a lot of high schoolers are now feeling the pressure of education, the pressure of a lot of different things, just different vectors coming to play, with COVID, with, college applications coming soon. A lot of people are like more and more saddened. And so like the concept of therapy is more discussed at our level nowadays, where maybe past like 20 years ago, high schoolers generally wouldn't discuss therapy unless there was a very traumatic experience that they went through. And so I guess I'm really curious on your work in psychotherapy, like your research, you're studying, um, and like maybe you could take me through like how the psychoanalytical approach with Freudian analysis has helped you, because I know, one of the biggest critiques of Freud is about how honestly like weird his theory can be in certain senses. Like I think I don't remember the exact term, but there's that one part of your mind, I think it's part of the id, where like you have like sexual desires for parental figures, and so that has been critiqued a lot. And so I'm just wondering like how psychoanalytical approaches can be relevant in therapy now, because I know Freud did do therapy, but I'm just not sure how that took place.
Okay, so first I would like to point out that yes, we are witnessing a huge rise in anxiety and depression. That is true, and that is becoming a huge problem. Um, and also the as you said, the pressure of college and school, and then the competitiveness in just finding the job and being the best at your job. That's where we at. That's what like, and that is becoming a huge problem. Yeah. And I think yeah, that is why more and more people are going to psychotherapy. I mean, I would like to point out that I was never in touch with the Freudian psychotherapy in practice. For right now, I'm still studying. I'm still a student, and um, so yeah, I mean, I know what you mean, like Freud's theory being weird or weirdly sounding. I would like to. I think at this point, I would like to say that I think. like taking a step back, we have to acknowledge how big of a difference Freud made. He showed us, he told us there is something there called unconscious consciousness, and no, there's a big part of you that you have no control over, and that was a big milestone in the understanding of how the man works. Um, but yeah, he like yeah, I mean, there are some of his theories that you might overthrow. A lot of people do that. A lot of people did that. But yeah, that's why this psychotherapeutical science is constantly developing. There are constantly coming some new branches of psychotherapy, new ways of looking at it. Psychoanalytical psychotherapy is, yes, the original one, or something like that, we can say, the Freudian one. But then you have all these different ones, like existential one, and the Gestalt, the family therapy, and so on, which is getting quite rich in terms of that. That's I think that's great. So yeah, sorry, what was the question here again? I'm sorry.
It was just kind of I was just kind of curious about like what you've researched. So I mean, you've mentioned like all of these different theories. Um, could you explain like maybe what your what the impact is on that? Like what exactly um is the conclusion of learning all of these things? Like I know at the end it's like for a purpose of therapy, but what does learning these theory like help you identify in patients? Or like you were mentioning the parts of the unconscious that Freud was instrumental in explaining, but like how is it possible to acknowledging that, how is it possible to change those things in patients? Or like your research or your studying right now, um, like how has that helped you come to a conclusion about it?
I mean,
It's
for
a
now we
difficult question. I'm not sorry. I'm not trying to like ask about like the very, very scientific, but I'm just trying to say maybe like from a top level approach, like how are these like theories like really helpful in analyzing patients, etc.
yeah, I mean, for now, I can't yet say that it helped because I'm still researching. So yeah, my PhD thesis, I'm doing it on actually philosophy of psychotherapy slash psychiatry, like existential psychiatry and things like that. Um, and I mean, just researching all these theories is interesting because, well, for me, the question is which standing point do I want to, start from? Um, like, what is the nature of a man? Like, first question. I think that if you want to heal or change someone's whatever, like whatever, by saying whatever, I mean whatever you call it. You can call it, it's you want to change his personality, his Mitsein from Heidegger's wording, and um, yeah, I think that, because the question of the nature of man is so open, and the nature of psychology, and the question of psychology, like what drives man to do what he does. Um, there's so many things to yet, yeah, find out that for me right now is I'm trying to I'm just trying to find my answer to where do I want to start doing the practice. The How do I see what for me is the which explanation does it for me, regarding the nature of the man. So right now I'm researching this existential point of view, which I find very interesting, because like, for example, one of the questions is, are you gonna look at the symptom when the symptom comes out, or are you just gonna look at the person as a whole, right? Not just the symptom. And these are very important questions to ask yourself before doing the psychotherapeutic, practice. Um, and here we are again, back to the philosophy, because I think here that is a perfect example how important philosophy is, with such important questions as is how to help someone who is, having breakdown, who is psychotic, who is depressed. Because if you want to start searching for answers, as you said before, we first have to know which questions to ask in the first place, right? So that is what philosophy taught us. It's not about just looking, as you said, it's not always about the answer. Sometimes it's about the questions too, and that is very important to me as a future psychotherapist. That I'm trying not to just search for the answers, but yeah, sometimes see if we have the right questions asked.
Okay, so I guess what it sounds like is maybe you're just developing your views. I mean, I understand you're a student, so obviously you're still going to be developing your views. And after even like once you become a psychotherapist, I mean, your conclusion will only come, once you're at your end of your practice or something like that, or because, you need a lot of test cases to figure it out. There's so many scenarios in which philosophers had a view in the beginning of their lifetime and then completely changed their view by the end of their lifetime. And that's just the process of asking you questions and then answering those questions by yourself. Um, I guess like when you were explaining, I'm not exactly familiar with existential psychotherapy or like psychoanalysis. Could you explain a little bit more about like what that field is? Because I have no idea what it was.
Um, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, it's it's like it's kind of similar to how you have all these different branches of philosophy. You have ethics, aesthetics, political philosophy, and so on. It's kind of the same in psychotherapy. You have all these different approaches that, and each of these has a different starting point. That's I mean, for example, um, um, I'm I don't want to say anything wrong right now, but yeah. So I'm just gonna stop here and say that every branch has a different starting point to what they focus on. One branch is gonna like, so I don't know, psychoanalysis is gonna um, go with you to your childhood, see what happened there, and so on. Existential psychotherapy is going to focus on like finding a meaning um, right now, not focusing on the past, because past is already part of your presence. So focusing on presence is also focusing on the past. And yeah, they have there are different approaches, but what I think is very important for everyone that is thinking about going to psychotherapy and being maybe confused with all those different approaches is that the studies showed that the approach itself has a very 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 little um, importance. Like, the thing that is most important is a psychotherapist as a person. If you don't have a connection with a psychotherapist, it's very normal, and you have to change him, because that is what is the healing part. That is what is the important part: the empathy, the connection, him as a person. That is so yeah, I mean, yeah, different approaches, I mean, different branches are gonna have bit different approach, but then again, a therapist is never gonna like do something that doesn't suit your situation. um and you can always change it, but yeah, the most important thing is a therapist as a person. That's what I want to point out.
Yeah, I mean that's definitely important no matter what branch you end up choosing of psychotherapy, it's always important to recognize that your fundamental goal is to help the individual. And so, maybe if even if you choose a specific branch, I'm sure that the approaches of the other ones that you've studied, they can still impact how you might, actually help your patient, which is definitely like kind of just wraps up everything and shows how like philosophy is all about coming together of different ideas, and that's really impactful in everyday practices as well, right? Like where you take a bunch of different views, and maybe they can all influence how you do your right, like you do your task, or how you help a patient, or how you write a program or something like that. They can all impact, which just generally shows the impact of philosophy in general. Um, just to quickly wrap up, I had just a last question for you. If there is anyone listening, who might need, or like might be in a depressive state right now, what is like one piece of like general advice that you could probably give them, um, like to help them? I mean, this may be like through your studies or just in general, like like I know Stoicism has a lot of work on like how to get back onto your feet if you're in like a state like that. Is there anything you've learned that can be very impactful, and just a message for our audience in general?
Okay, so I don't I don't really want to give any advice on how to act because every problem is very specific, and especially I don't want, if you feel like you're dealing with depression, I'm not gonna say how to get back on your feet, because if you can't, well, you can't, and that's okay. I mean, it's not it's not okay, but it's okay to just not feel bad about that, additionally, because I think the biggest burden with depression is that, for example, your body doesn't allow you to, I don't know, get up in the morning, and then the additional feeling of guilt comes because you're not productive. And just for I think the first step that I would wish people would do is, get try to lose the guilt part. And I think that I think it's the best thing is if you can, to recognize the problem and to admit it. And just admit to someone that you can. I mean, I know it can be hard to find someone to talk to about this, because I know how it hurts when you're trying to trust someone and tell him your problems, and he kind of downsizes them, like, no, we all have those days, and it can hurt. But maybe I mean, if you can, try to talk to like tell a friend or something like that. But then if you can, of course, I would suggest going to psychotherapy. Not everything, I mean, there is no universal rule. So I don't want to really give any advice, because but yeah, I think what I can say to everyone, is yeah, as I said, just um I don't know, through, I hope that people can, through self-reflection and through um yeah, through self-reflection, see that there are problems there, right? Because maybe they are not hidden, like for example, depression not necessarily hidden in feeling tired or or in a way you see it, I don't know, on television. It can be in your anger, it can be anywhere. So, and what can help you recognize it is, I think, this just the self-reflection. I think that is very important thing. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
is the advice that I would give now. But I hope you, if you're dealing with it, can find some help. Some people don't want help from others. Some people don't find therapy productive, and they, of course, they can find ways to overcome it themselves. There are also some ways, but I just don't want to say just be, I don't want to give any advice, because
Mhm.
I don't think it would be nice for me
Yeah.
to give a specific advice how to handle it, because there is no.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. Maybe that question wasn't framed the best, but just like in general, I was thinking like maybe a message that can be sent out is that self-reflection is good through philosophical means, and any sort of self-reflection that you have can only be beneficial, I think, and obviously, I mean, making statements like only is what philosophy doesn't want you to do. So maybe only isn't the best word here, but in general, I think self-reflection is really beneficial, and also maybe accompaniment can also be really helpful. Talking to someone else, not just in terms of the state that someone might be in, but also just in general, having friends and just discussions can be so much more valuable than just your own interrogations, which is why some of like the best works in philosophy are also group works. And so just because we're able to understand a lot more and combine different viewpoints to create a more centralized argument in a way. With that being said, I really want to thank you for your time. We covered a lot, just basics of like philosophy, your story about philosophy, as well as your master thesis about narcissism. We covered some cool topics about state philosophy, state narcissism, if that's even a thing, about comedy, and then we wrapped it up with psychotherapy. So I definitely do want to thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And I feel it's really great to try to put philosophy, out there. And if I can give one word of advice to everyone who is like reading philosophy and trying to find answer in philosophy, just remember that it's always okay not to understand philosophy. You will understand it, and you will get there. And just, I think the most important thing is in philosophy is just to never give up, because there are some important answers there, important point of views, but sometimes they can be difficult to grasp, to understand. So just don't give up and have fun.
Yeah, for sure. With that being said, that wraps up our episode for the Dialexicon podcast. Thank you for everyone watching, and we'll see you next week.